Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. Today is August the 26th, 2026. Today I'm shifting gears and discussing some career guidance, educational counseling, specifically for my niece, right? Specifically for one of my nieces. And as soon as I get that out of the way, I'm going to discuss, uh, financial career advice for another mentee who expressed her interest in pursuing a Wall Street career. But I'm going to start off with my niece. So, my niece, she's young, so I'm not going to say her name. I'm not going to disclose information about her, but she is my brilliant niece, and she expressed her desire to become a dentist. So, it would make her the first dentist in my family. I don't know of any. I come from a very large extended family on both sides. You know, my mom and my dad. I don't know of any dentists. I know we have pharmacists. I know we have medical doctors. I have pharmacists as first cousins, several pharmacists as first cousins, several medical doctors as first cousins, several a veterinarian. I'm talking about the sciences now. I'm not going to talk about the humanities or not other things that my family is into, but in terms of the sciences. So I was particularly proud, and I was joyful to hear my cousin saying she wanted to when she was telling me she wanted to become a dentist, which I didn't know where that came from. A dentist. She has a beautiful smile, so I guess maybe because she gets all these comments about her beautiful teeth, she decided she was going to fix people's teeth to be as pretty as hers. But she's very brilliant, and now, something I'm going to say is that she's the daughter of my late first cousin, Professor Pius Adesomi. He was director of Canada's Institute of African Studies, and he was a very prominent author. He was the author of Naijano de Carry Last, and he was a brilliant writer, and I used to enjoy reading his stories in the papers. I used to relish reading the way he merged, his mastery of the English language. He was a professor of literature, and he spoke French as well. So he was a professor of literature, and but he knew our rich Yoruba culture, right? He was very conversant, very was an expert on Yoruba language. So he fused the his mastery of the English language with Yoruba law, Yoruba culture, and of course writing in English. And of course, he also understood the emergent, the Creole that Nigerians have, the lingua franca. And so Nigerians have a national language called Pidgin now. It's an adulteration or a fusion of a variety of languages, with English fused with English as well. So it's we call it broken English. And so he knew how to just weave all these things together, right? And the Nigerian zeitgeist mindset, and tell a nice narrative, right? A very engaging narrative. So I had thought she would, you know, be interested in becoming a writer like her dad. But I mean, that doesn't mean she can't be a Renaissance woman, right? I have several different majors myself, and so I guess she might do that as well. I was a pre med student, but enough said. I'm going to quickly get on and talk about. Um, I'm going to talk about because she watches my videos, and so this is specifically for her. I'm going to talk about what she needs to do to get into dental school in the United States. Um, well, so by the way, I was a pre med student, like I said, and it's interesting. I discovered that the early basic requirements in dental school. are similar to the early courses that are taken in medical school as well, the first to second year, courses. So in any event, let me get on with it, and because I want to keep it short for her. So, first of all, you've got to decide that you're going to get an undergraduate degree, right? You don't get it off, you just don't rush off to a dental school. You're going to get an undergraduate degree first because being a dentist in the United States, you're required to be a graduate student. So, it's a graduate level program. So, you do an undergraduate degree, preferably in chemistry or biology, right? Preferably in the sciences, and you meet all uh, the science requirements such as biology, biochemistry, biochemistry. You do well. You do chemistry, biology, organic chemistry, physics, some math courses, I suppose, maybe calculus one, and English, right? In physics, right? Like I said, physics. Okay, so those are the courses that you do, and then you do your clinicals, right? And then you take the dental admissions test. You call it DAT. So that's the equivalent of the MCAT. So you do the DAT to get into a 4 year accredited dental program, right? Accredited by the Commission on uh, Dental Accreditation. That's CODA, right? So you get into a 4 year program. And so you take the 4 year program, rigorous, that's you're in dental school. At the end of the 4 year program, then you qualify to receive, uh, instead, like the equivalent for medical school is Doctor of Medicine. For dentists, it's called the Doctor of Dental Surgery, that's DDS, or it could be Doctor of Dental Medicine, right? DDM, DDS or DDM. DDS, that's Doctor of Dental Surgery, or the DDM, like I said. And then after that, more exams, right? More exams. You take a written examination. That's the integrated, administered by the integrated board of dental examination. That's a written examination. And after that, you take your clinical assessments, clinical testing your clinical skills, an evaluation testing your clinical skills under a state or region. And after that, once you've passed all of that, then you apply to a state for your license. You apply to a state for your license. So that's the short of it. And if I have any more tips on your path to being a dentist, I will provide that. It's kind of interesting that as I was looking at this other, and in case you are interested in a career on Wall Street, I watched an interesting movie yesterday called Equities because I was looking for a movie on career path to dentist, and this popped up, Equities, and it was interesting. It was about a woman who was a Wall Street, she was an investment banker, right? She was an investment banker on Wall Street. Investment bankers, what do they do? Well, they help raise money for mergers and acquisitions. They help take companies, it could be a startup, they help take a startup public, through an initial public offering, and they value that company, right? They do a valuation, and a lot of what they do, the younger staff focus on modeling, right? They do a lot of modeling, trying to value the company, and they produce what's called a pitch book. Now, investment bankers make a tremendous amount of money. They make more money than doctors and dentists. They make the most money of the professionals. Interestingly, 3 years ago, Wall Street said lawyers had passed them, right, in earnings in New York. And it makes sense because AI, artificial intelligence, is going to be taking away a lot of what they do because a lot of the junior staff spend a lot of tremendous amount of money. That's what they're paid for, a tremendous amount of time, which they're paid for creating pitch books, right? Pitch books. And I've seen those. Now, I was a stockbroker and I worked in an investment bank, but on the sales, wealth, and management team, right? But investment bankers, people in the mergers and acquisitions, they would do road shows, right? And so I met with them. And in fact, they interviewed me for a position in New York. So I was on the sales and trading side, sales as a did client relationship manager. I was a stockbroker. I became a financial advisor. I worked at two different major banks, and so I learned a lot about what they wanted to do. So if you want to get into a career, something that I like to do is I go and start reading a lot about them. I read everything, what they're doing. I might even watch films about that, about them. That was what I did when I wanted to go to law school. I went to law school much later in life, and so I learned everything about law school. I watched movies, the ins, the outs, so it's very advisable if you're interested in a career. Try and get a lot of literature on what they do and the paths and the environment, the sort of people you might be working with, what are the requirements, and the barriers to entry. So this movie Equities was very interesting because it was about females, right? The protagonist was a woman, not a man. She was an investment banker, and she was a senior investment banker, but she wanted to be the head of the M&A group, the head of the group, right? That was her aspiration, and she was now middle aged. She was not married, and those aspects of marriage and sacrifices that women uh, end up making in their careers due to raising a family, right? It's women who can give birth, not the men. Uh, there's of course there's an imbalance on Wall Street, and we see the lady who's middle aged, who's trying to become the head of the M&A group, and we see her. She acquired a deal for a startup technology social media company in the makings of like a Facebook, right? And so this young person is trying to take his company public, right? Taking it public is, they offer shares to the public, and there's a huge valuation. A lot of people buy the company, and it makes the owners of the company immediate billionaires or whatever, just like Mark Zuckerberg or the case of the owner of Twitter, now called X, who's the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk. So it's investment bankers that raise money for them. That's what investment bankers do on Wall Street. And so this woman, she was very aggressive about the business, and she was very career oriented, and she sacrificed family, right? She'd never married. She had a live-in partner with one of her colleagues who was a stockbroker, right? He was on the brokerage side. They worked for the same firm, but he was on the stockbroker. He was on the brokerage side, and because so the investment bankers, right, the M&A acquisitions, the IPO, they take the company public, but they're not the ones who are going to sell the shares. It's brokers who sell the shares, right, who trade and sell the shares to the public eventually. So and there are lots of things like insider trading, right? So this woman makes a lot of sacrifice. She's very ambitious, and then she has an assistant who's a vice president, another young lady, right? And she's married, but it turns out that you see the other side of the a woman's professional career, because it was clear in the film that um, the women were sleeping with their clients just to attract business, which is unfortunate, right? They're sleeping with their clients to be able to attract business. Okay, this is the point where I guess my niece is not. I hope my niece is not listening to this, so she can sign off. But so this was something that was happening, right? And the clients expected the women, even though they were professionals, to sleep with them, just so they could get their business, which is very unfortunate. Now, this firm was also being investigated by by the prosecutor, by a DA, a district attorney, a state attorney, right, U.S. state attorney. When it's federal, right, then you call them a U.S. state attorney. So they were investigating them for securities violations. So when you join a Wall Street firm, or you become a securities trader, or you get into investment banking, there's a series of exams that you have to take, regulations, so that you comply with federal securities laws. For instance, the 1933 Securities Act So I was a stockbroker. I had to take the Series 7, that's General Securities uh, Representative examination. That's called the Series 7. And of course, I took the Series 66, which is Uniform Combined State Law exam, or also the Investment Advisor exam. It's combined, so it's called the Series 66. Basically, also teaching you to be able to adhere to securities laws, so you don't violate securities laws. You know, uh, the prohibition, the prohibition on insider trading and whatnot. So this company, it turned out, was violating securities laws, including insider trading and things like that. And so they were being investigated by a state attorney. But it's funny, you see how it's a cutthroat environment, but there's also a lot of there are people who stab each other in the back in the company, right? They do all these, it's cloak and daggers, and you see her assistant, the female, stabs her in the back. We don't know if she sleeps with her partner, right? And her assistant gets pregnant, and she hates the fact that she's pregnant. So we don't know if it's the client's child or her husband, because when she discovers she's pregnant, she's angry. She's very angry about it, and then she stabs her boss in the back, right? And her boss gets fired. She sabotages her boss's deal, right? Her boss was trying to do this big deal, so she become the head of the bank. She wanted to become the head, and she wanted to be a rainmaker. She'd sacrificed so much, sacrificed marriage, sacrificed having kids, and she was female, and the men had it good, and she'd had a mentor, but now she was trying, giving it her best to become a rainmaker. That's what they call them, the people who bring in the big bucks. They call them rainmakers, right, in investment banking. And somehow, when they were almost there, her assistant, who got pregnant, her assistant hated the fact that she got pregnant. Her assistant went to see her live in her boss's partner, another male, the one who's the stockbroker, who's right. She goes to see him, gives him information that sabotages their deal, and the deal founders. And the deal founders, everything goes bust. The female boss gets fired because she loses it. She goes ballistic. She goes postal at work. She gets fired, and her assistant takes her place. So many funny things happen, twists and turns in the, curveball in the end. And the prosecutor who was investigating them, taking them down, she ends up going to look for a job, trying to get into investment banking herself, Wall Street. And she admits in the end, she said she wants the money. She likes the money, and she wants to make a lot of money. And she doesn't see anything wrong for females, professionals admitting that they want to make a lot of money and they like money. So that's how it ends. So it's interesting. If you're interested in other movies about Wall Street, another one I remember we watched, they showed it to us in a class I did in law school, Barbarians at the Gates. It was then, at the time, it's based on a true story. It was back then the largest merger that ever took place, and it was the largest for the next 2 decades. That's R.R. Reynolds with Nabisco, right? R.R. Reynolds, they made tobacco, and Nabisco, they made Oreos, they made cookies and things like that. So it was the biggest merger at the time, $25 billion. Now that's puny compared to these $1 trillion mergers that take place on the regular on Wall Street. But very interesting for people who are interested in careers on Wall Street. Uh, I'm going to sign off now, and I'll do more of these for people who are interested in careers. By the way, if you're interested in a career on Wall Street, then you should do finance, do accounting, things like that. And of course, you've got to be personable and master Excel. Well, things have changed. Back then, it was a master of Excel. Artificial intelligence has changed all of that, because AI can do things Excel does. By you just commanding them to do it, they'll do it in a minute. But also the traditional path was to get an MBA. Now these days they say an MBA is overrated. People who don't have a finance or business background typically go into an MBA, right? But in any event, I'll do more videos on career guidance. My name is Oluro Timiosha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.